I'm Emily Greenhagen, Transformation Lead at Ginkgo Bioworks, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Before we dive in and meet our panelists, I have a few quick announcements. The session will be recorded and shared via email with all registrants. And during the discussion, we would love to hear from you. So we hope you will use the stage chat on the right side of your screen to send messages, comments, and questions to the panelists and to one another. And for those who do not know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Millions of women visit Fairygodboss for career connections, jobs, community advice, hard to find intel about how companies treat women, and virtual events like this one. So I'm excited to kick off today's event, Thriving Through Change, Lessons Learned from Career Transitions, sponsored by my employer, Ginkgo Bioworks. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by three of my colleagues, Birgitta, Beatrice, and Ina. Let's take a few minutes for each of you to introduce yourselves before we dive into the discussion. We'd love to hear what's going on in your life personally and professionally, and what you do in your role today at Ginkgo Bioworks. Ina, we'll start with you.
All right. Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to meet you. I'm Ina Kratzenberg. I'm the Chief Business Officer at Ginkgo. I've been at Ginkgo for the last 6.5 years. I'm originally from Chicago. I see a number of folks from Chicago area. So hello, Windy City. I now live in the Bay Area of California. And I see some folks who are dialing in from the Bay Area as well. So it's good to see you all. My background's in chemical engineering, but I've pivoted over to a commercial role about 25 years ago. So definitely have a lot to share about career pivots and what I've done. I'm a mother of 2 grown children. So it's been an amazing journey for me to be a working mom, and have certainly experienced a lot of what it means to be a working mom, and happy to share some of that as it relates to career transitions as well. But looking forward to talking to you all.
All right, thanks, Ina. Beatrice?
Hello, everyone. My name is Beatriz Pacheco, or Bea for short. I'm an organism engineer at Ginkgo Bioworks. I've been at Ginkgo for 2.5 years now. I'm originally from Brazil, more recently from Canada, where I was attending graduate school. That was my transition into this role in industry. I was just commenting before we started that personally, my cat is learning to ride my Roomba, and she also learned how to turn it on by herself. So I get all notifications on the app that my cat is having fun at home. So that's how it's been out.
All right, thanks, Beatrice. Birgitta?
Hi, I'm Birgitta Simon. I'm the Vice President of Technical Platform in Concentric, which is Ginkgo's biosecurity business unit. So I guess I can summarize my role as leading science and quality for that organization. So building a scalable technology and global pathogen testing networks. I have 4 fantastic teams. So they focus on R&D, bioinformatics, data analysis, and quality, and our lab network partnerships outside our facility here. As you can probably tell, I'm originally from Denmark. I came to the US to do a PhD many, many years ago with every intention of going back. But then I met someone, I had some kids, I got a great job. So somehow that just never happened. So our kids, like Ina, have 2 adult kids. They're both in college now, literally just became an empty nester. So I can sit here with my cat, who's already excited about this webinar. Who's Cookie. She'll be back, trust me. And I'm sitting here in my very empty house, just competing with my husband for who can have the loudest Zoom call.
All right, thanks all. I'm excited about our discussion today. And for those just tuning in, I'd like to remind everyone that we will be answering questions that come directly from all of you. So please submit your questions in the chat on the right side of the screen, and we will do our best to respond to as many as we can. So as we collect questions from all the audience members, we'll kick off with our first question. It'll be a 2-part question. So part 1, where did you start your career journey? What were your previous roles and experiences like? We already got some insight into a little bit of that in the introductions. And part 2, what made you decide to make the career change and pivot to your current role? And we'll start with Beatrice.
So as I mentioned, I'm from Brazil. So I did my undergrad there in food engineering with a minor in biotech. Then I moved to Canada for a master's in chemical engineering. And I actually started a PhD there that I dropped to come work for Ginkgo. So that was my career change. And what made me do it was, well, mostly mental health. So I wasn't happy with my PhD. The project wasn't going anywhere. Having the lab and eventually the world shut down because of the pandemic didn't help. And then I got to know Ginkgo through one of my extracurricular activities, and I was really excited. So I decided to apply. So the pivot came from me being unhappy with the project, the workplace, and what I was doing, and learning about something that seemed cooler. That's how I ended up at Ginkgo.
Awesome. Ina, how about you?
So I started my career in oil and gas. I graduated with an undergrad in chemical engineering. And back in the early 90s when I graduated, folks with a chemical engineering background work for an oil company or a chemicals company. So I worked for an oil company. I did that for a couple of years. I was mentioned I'm from Chicago originally, so I went to work for Amoco, now BP Amoco. When you work for a large company, you actually get a lot of opportunities to move around. And then that's what I did. So in my 9 years at BP Amoco, I probably moved to about 5 or 6 different jobs. And a lot of it is just based on, one, what the company needs are, and two, what your interest areas are. So I was very proactive in identifying what I thought were interesting things that I wanted to learn. In my early 20s, it wasn't so much about, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z because I need to get to a certain role. It was really more about what can I learn to build up my skill sets so that I can continue to advance like what I think is interesting and how can I like be better at what I can offer. So I did a number of different things for the oil company. But after 9 years, I had to make a big career pivot because of life. My husband got a job in San Diego, and we're from Chicago originally, right? So I know nothing about California, let alone like finding jobs in San Diego. But I had, prior to moving to San Diego, left and went to get an MBA. So when I got my MBA, I decided, okay, if I'm going to move to San Diego and have to find a new job and start from scratch, I want to do something that at least my young kids at the time can relate to. And oil and gas was not something they understood. So I looked at entertainment, I looked at consumer products, and serendipitously, I ended up getting a job with Pixar Animation Studios. So I went from oil and gas, starting my career working at a refinery, to working for Pixar, where my job was to oversee the Disney Pixar relationship. If you look me up on IMDb, you will find me on movie credits from like Monsters, Inc., Incredibles, Cars, et cetera, et cetera. I was there for about 6.5 years until it was bought out by Disney. So that's a big career pivot. Then I had another career pivot after I left Pixar because Pixar got sold by Disney. Or got sold to Disney. So at that time, I decided, okay, I've got this great experience. What do I want to do? I had a chance to go to Apple to continue to work for Steve Jobs, but I decided I didn't want the commute from where I was living. Bay Area commute is awful. It's worse than Chicago or LA, trust me. Then I looked at like interesting things I wanted to do and found a company called Amyris that was just starting to work in the synthetic biology industry, which is the industry Ginkgo is in right now. That was about 16 years ago. And I was enamored with the whole idea that you can program biology to mix stuff. So combining my interest in the technology and what the company was targeted to do at the time, which is to use biology to make a malaria drug that is not largely available, and that is a much needed drug to address some of the malaria needs, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. I took that job. And I've been in business development in the synthetic biology industry for the last 16 years. So that's sort of like my big career pivots. Lots of different industries, lots of different roles, but a lot of it driven by life. more than anything else.
Yeah, I love your story, Ina. So thanks for sharing it with everyone. Birgitta, how about you?
Yeah, so I started looking around when I got to a point in my postdoc where I just couldn't afford daycare anymore for my kids. They were, 2 and 6 at the time. I had one doing grad school and one doing postdoc. So I ended up taking a job at a local company with a really weird, mysterious name. They were called 454. They wouldn't really tell me what they were doing. They were still in stealth, but I don't know, somehow they convinced me to take the job anyway. They had just asked for like some really basic science skills. I'm like, I can do that. That sounds good. I was probably just really naive, but it turned out to be a fantastic job in a technology area that's called next-gen sequencing, which is something that's become really, really important to basically all of science since then. So that was a good choice. The company was acquired by a really big company, Roche Diagnostics. So I ended up doing eventually like a lot of product development and virus sequencing work, which has come in handy recently. And 7 years into that job, I got laid off. Company was closed. So I just like sort of on a whim decided to reinvent myself and call myself a consultant. I made a website and I made like business cards, and the next day I got a contract, which was insane. So I did that for a little bit. So I entered the clinical world, which is sort of already done clinical stuff as part of my job, but this became full-on clinical. And then I took a job at a startup called Veritas Genetics, which did human genome sequencing and clinical reporting. And I was there for 5 years. And I actually started at Ginkgo in a really different role than what I do right now. So I would actually consider that sort of my real pivot. So I have this like really logical story I tell myself and I tell at interviews that I wanted to move out of the clinical space and out of human disease and back into, exciting research and innovation. And this might sort of be true, but really I was like just worried that I would lose my job, right? So company wasn't doing super well, it was burning cash. And I also sat in traffic for like 3 to 4 hours every day in Boston, which just wasn't that much fun. And, I was still the major caregiver for my kids, right? Even though they were teenagers, they still need like, sports and doctor's appointments and forms and school and, I don't know, urgent care, not infrequently. So it just kept getting more and more intense. So I went with Ginkgo instead. Of course, getting out the clinical world didn't work so well because pandemic hit, and here we are, open a clinical lab at Ginkgo, and now I essentially, joined the side of the company that does this full time.
Awesome. So following up on that and also incorporating this great question from Peggy in the comments, Ina and Birgitta, I'd love to hear about what sort of external factors helped you during these career changes. Like was the company you were going to have a specific company culture that helped support this? Did you have critical manager support, mentors? Peggy specifically asked, like, for Ina specifically, like, did you have connections in synthetic biology? Like, how did you get your way into this entirely new industry? So let's start with Ina.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question, Peggy, and thanks, Emily. Yeah, it was through connection. And I think just kind of more broadly speaking, when I think about sort of how, what are some of the external forces or resources that like allowed me to make some of these career pivots, it really came from like 2 sources. The first is my connection to the school, the university that I went to. So for my very first job right out of undergrad, I did on-campus recruiting and was hired to go to Amico. So that was a school-related sort of network that allowed that to happen. My second job at Pixar was through Kellogg, which is where I went to get my MBA. It was through the recruiting process that took place at school that allowed me the opportunity to meet Pixar and have a chance to interview with them. But when I left Pixar, thereafter, all the jobs were done through like my network. I actually have not applied to any jobs since then. The Amyris job came about because the CEO of Amyris at the time, actually he's the incoming CEO at the time, hadn't even joined Amyris yet full time, but I knew someone who knows him from Amico. So I just leveraged my network to make a connection. I saw a company I was interested in. I saw that the incoming CEO is currently at Amico. I called up my old buddies at Amico, like, hey, who is this guy, John Mello? Do you know him? And serendipitously, the gentleman I called up was actually in the car with John Mello at the time. So it was just the most like incredible coincidence that ended up with my friend Rob handing the cell phone over to John and say, you got to talk to Ina. And that's kind of what happened. And that's how I got the job with Amyris. I've been in 4 different synthetic biology companies, Ginkgo being the last one and the best one. And each of the companies I was recruited to through my contacts within the synthetic biology industry.
Yeah, the network is such a powerful tool, particularly during transitions and pivots specifically. That's awesome. Birgitta, same question for you.
I have actually a totally random story on how I managed to get into Ginkgo. So the company that I worked at, the startup, was called Veritas. So both Veritas and Ginkgo had made it onto this list that gets published every year that's called the CNBC Disruptor 50 list. So, both companies on it. It was super cool. We were excited at Veritas, and we got a congratulatory email from the NASDAQ, which has like the picture of the Times Square, your logo goes in Times Square. There's a picture of that. So the picture was right. But somebody at CNBC had made a typo, so I guess they sent it to Ginkgo first. So they forgot to switch out Ginkgo's name for Veritas in the email we got. So it said, congratulations, Ginkgo Bioworks. I'm like, I've never heard of that place. Let me check that out. So I Google, and up pops this fantastic job that just like has my name on it, right? With the technology I know, but not in the clinical world. And I'm like, I'll give it a shot, and I got the job.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I love like just like random thing, like you're aware of this something out there, and it leads you down this path to an amazing new place. Well, I am very glad, Birgitta, that CNBC made that typo. So thank you, CNBC. All right, so this next question is for Beatrice and Birgitta. How have you benefited from the skills and experience you've gained over the course of your career journey? We'll start with Beatrice.
Yeah, I love the stories. Someone mentioned, Birgitta mentioned that you have the story that you tell yourself on how things, or that you tell in interviews on how things progress. You don't need to know that while you're doing it. That's one of the biggest things that I learned interviewing and leaving academia, is that once you're writing those like CV lines, you don't know where it's leading. But once you're in an interview, you can tell that story however you want. And another thing that I learned that was really important to me is seeing the fit between myself and the job position or the culture or the company. For me particularly, it was very obvious once I saw it. It was obviously a position that I would like, or a place that I would like to work. I wasn't expecting it to be so clear. So that was something else.
Awesome. How about you, Birgitta?
Yeah, it's actually, again, probably more luck than anything. But it's it's remarkable how almost everything I've done in my career like came together to actually make me successful at Ginkgo. Part of that was the pandemic, to be fair. I have some like really specific technical skills and they're super rusty, and I don't actually know how to do most of the things that my teams do, and I don't need to, and I've made peace with that. So I have all these disparate experiences, but there are some things that I've like done over and over, right? So leading technical teams, leading computational teams, product development is a thread that goes through. Clinical reports, dashboards, like physical product development, project management, quality system management. So you learn to make like really clear documentation, setting really clear goals, tracking against them. So all of those things like sound super boring, but they're actually like the key, right, to a lot of things. So I think it's really important that you have like teams feel like there's a plan, right? It doesn't really matter if you can go execute that plan, if you can make it for people and you can make them understand it and you can track them against it and make them feel happy about that. That is something that you learn over time in your career, and that translates pretty much to anything.
Yeah, that's leadership is such a transferable skill, and is such a powerful tool in getting things accomplished. So awesome. The next question for Ina and Birgitta: what do you find most rewarding and challenging about your current work? We'll start with Ina.
All right, thanks, Emily. I love this question because the question basically suggests that the most rewarding is the most challenging. And I'm a firm believer that it's through, the hardships that you really, that you overcome, that you really find it's such a sweet reward at the end. For me, the hardest thing and the most rewarding thing is really about keeping up with what I need to do to be good at delivering what I need to develop to deliver in my job. I work for a company that is on the cutting edge of science. So there's a lot of technology that I don't know. I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering. I don't know the first thing about biology. And I work with a bunch of PhD biologists like Emily, like Birgitta and Beatrice, who know so much about biology that I can only, I am so far behind, I can't even learn half of what you guys know. But it's the changing market environment. It is the way we need to do things differently, the processes and tools that we have. My God, I had to learn so much about like marketing with TikTok that I never had learned before, right? So I just think being able to keep up with what I need to do to ensure that my company can grow at the very fast pace that we aspire to grow at is one of the hardest, most challenging things. So we need to adopt a continuing a learning mindset so we can continue to push ourselves to learn more. We have to continue to like explore the world in different ways. I think the old adage of you can't teach an old dog new tricks is very true, but this old dog has to learn many new tricks, and I'm continuing to push myself to learn many new tricks. I think when I do that, it's really cool because I'm learning about all sorts of different technology. I'm learning all sorts of different ways that I can improve how me and how my team can function, how we can create a better cross-functional team environment so we can improve on the processes that relies on one another. So there's just this continuing learning process that I think has been hard, especially for a growing company like ours, but has been the most rewarding.
Awesome. Yeah, I will say that Ina is selling her biology knowledge short. She keeps up with the best of us. So, but yeah, the learning and growth mindset, I think that is really, you really hit the nail on the head there, Ina. That is something that is so core to successfully making pivots throughout your careers. Always learning, always growing, and having that growth mindset. Awesome. Birgitta, let's hear from you.
I'd say honestly, the most rewarding thing is the culture, I would say here, it's very, very mission driven, very positive. So especially in Concentric, everybody was hired during the pandemic, right? That is the essence of the company. So we're remoting in from all over the country, sometimes all over the world. We travel a lot out to our partners. And it's just like super remarkable to see people so engaged and in sync, even if they almost never meet face to face, right? We have on-sites, maybe once a quarter, 3 times a year, but that's it. But challenges actually largely result from people being so engaged, right? You have, quite often you have like too many cooks in the kitchen. People pile on and Slack conversations and they all have good intentions, and it just leads to like these trails that just go off the rails. You have a lot of distraction. You just don't have enough bandwidth to be everywhere at once and kind of get people back on track. But I mean, in general, this is a good problem to have. I've had the opposite in previous jobs, and this is a much better problem.
Awesome. All right, we are going to take an audience question. So we're going back in time to Fiona. Asked a great question. Particularly, I think that it's a little bit outside the experience set of the group here, because so much of what we're talking about with enabling the transitions is having a strong network, how that network can be built from the ground up, starting with your degree. Fiona asked a great question. What advice would you give to someone who does not have time or money to earn a new degree to be able to pivot into a new career? So without that network, without the school recruiting opportunities, what would you suggest? Anyone can answer.
Well, I'd say network with anybody you can. It doesn't have to be through a school, right? If I made a list of the people who have made an impact, like Ina had some examples, right? It's a very random list of people. Somebody gave me an opportunity. My first job, I only got because the boss of the company was Danish, like so random. There was another person who had interviewed, who knew somebody on the other coast, who had interviewed with somebody who had met somebody, blah, 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 right? And then a connection was made like 3 degrees. It's very random. Talk to everybody. Post on LinkedIn. Think about what you have in terms of like transferable skills, and be bold, make something up a little bit. Like, don't say you have a skill you don't have, but like tell the story of how you can apply the skills that you do have in a different setting, and you might just make it.
Yeah, that's great. And that leads in nicely to our next question of what is your best piece of advice for other women who are thinking about making a career pivot? So Birgitta, I mean, you gave a great answer, but anything you want to add to what you just said, more generally?
Just building up from what Birgitta said, yeah, connections come from all sorts of random places. I also had a connection with someone from Ginkgo just because we're Brazilian. So that also happens. And I think something that took me a little longer to learn was that people are usually excited to talk about what they do, or most often they're not. They're willing to extend a hand and to, if not help you out with something, just tell you about some position that you don't know about or what skills are valuable in that industry. So yeah, reaching out would be my biggest advice.
Great. Anything additional to add to that, Birgitta?
But I also say that a pivot is, the definition of pivot is going to vary, right, from person to person. For me, maybe moving in and out of human diagnostics is a big pivot, but at the end of the day, it might not sound like much, but it's a lot to me. I'm still a manager with a science education, right, and you can apply that in a lot of different settings. As Ina also said, right, she's moved between all sorts of strange businesses, but it's the same skills throughout. You just have to make that mark, right? You have to get to the hiring manager by any connection you can find, and then pitch yourself. it's most of us as hiring managers aren't actually looking for super specific skills at the end of the day, even if it's in the job description. So that's the other piece of advice. If you see a job description, you have 70% of it, apply. Don't go through the list and say, okay, don't have that very specific skills, so therefore I'm not going to apply. A lot of women, specifically, research has shown, right, that specifically women will not apply, but the men will happily apply. And then they get their name and their CV in front of somebody, and they're going to like, oh, well, I actually have most of it. I can train them, and they get the job. So go for it. Be bold.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And building off of that, we have a question from Stephanie, who says that she has a track record of transitioning industries from fashion to industrial manufacturing. So sounds like a similar track record as Ina. But now she's pursuing a digital health head of brand/product marketing position. And she's continuing to hit roadblocks with hiring managers and recruiters that are just saying that she simply doesn't have healthcare experience. So it sounds like I would say, like, based on what you were just saying, Birgitta, like the big thing that I would emphasize is transferable skills, identifying what those transferable skills are. But any other advice from the panel here?
Yeah, I think it's important to identify what are those specific transferable skills that is applicable to the job that you're applying for. So if you're looking to transfer your skills in understanding product marketing from fashion to digital health, that's great. Provide examples of where you have been able to do that well, but learn the language that is appropriate for digital health, so that not only are you transferring the skills that you know about how to do product marketing well, but you know it in the context of digital health. Now, depending on what your employer is looking for, sometimes people care more about like your experience doing that functional area. Sometimes people do care more about what you know about that particular industry. In this case, I think your calling card is, I'm very good in this particular functional area in product marketing. But I also understand enough about digital health where I can speak intelligently using the vocabulary that applies to your market, where I can demonstrate to you I'm able to transfer the skills over to digital health. Even if you've never done it before, if you can talk about digital health in a way that provides conviction, that enables the hiring party to be convinced that even though you don't have that background, you can learn it quickly, I think that's going to be really compelling.
And thanks, Ina. And related to this, we have a great question here from Peggy. Says, for those leaning into networking to change industries, so same topic of pivoting to a new industry, Peggy's asking, how long did it take to find a new position? I want to have a realistic time frame. So Ina, do you have you have personal experience with this? So each time you pivoted, how long did that take, both from your like research perspective to learn, like to identify the new industry, and then once you identified what you wanted to do, to get the first job in that industry?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably around 4 to 6 months, but I do think a lot of it depends on kind of the reason for the switch and kind of the macro environment too. So when I switched over to filmed entertainment, I had just gotten my MBA. So I was sort of lumped into the newly minted MBA class, but you know, Pixar is like a recruiter who like posted a job in the job board. But even then, I looked at a number of different companies, and by the time I finished interviewing and getting the job, it was about a 4-month period. I think the switch from Pixar to Amyris took about the same time, 4 to 6 months, I want to say. And that's largely because I wanted to do more of a deeper dive into what the SynBio business is all about. So I think it does take a bit of time. And that transition happened in 2010, 2005, no, 2003, something like that, in the mid 2000s. So I think the job market was a lot more robust, and there were a lot of companies that were like getting financing in Series A for like the synbio kind of area. So I sort of timed a market at the right time to be able to find a job. And I know it's a little bit different now. So yeah, there are a couple of factors that you just can't control, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really helpful insight though, Ina. All right, fun question for Beatrice and Ina. What are some of your favorite things about working at Ginkgo Bioworks? We'll start with Beatrice.
The lack of routine, as others mentioned, is definitely a plus. There's always something crazy going on. There's always someone talking about something very interesting in the kitchen. So I really like that. There's a lot of excited people talking about wacky topics all the time. And I'm going to mention a close second is the dog room.
Yeah, I love the dog room. We have so for everyone in the audience, we have a room where you can set up your desk to work, and that's the room where people can bring their dogs on site. So a lot of fun. Ina, how about you? Ina, you're muted. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. So many things. If I have to just pick one, I would say it is the culture at the company. It is really about all of us pulling together with a swing for the fences mentality. Everybody comes to work with the best intentions. I think, you all have worked in different places where you're just not sure if the other person that you're dealing with always have like the best intentions of doing a good job and helping the company grow. I can assure you at Ginkgo, I have not ever encountered someone who is not bringing like their best selves to work. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the company has a very transparent culture. I think the company has a very flat kind of organizational culture. So, our CEO will talk to, a summer intern, and have a really robust conversation about how he thinks about the business. So I think that type of environment really facilitates people being open and transparent and collaborative with one another. So I think there's a lot of cultural aspects of Ginkgo that's really special, and it really makes us feel like we're all in, right? So I really feel like we have a great environment.
Yeah, totally agree. 100%. Thanks. All right. So Fairygodboss has a tradition of asking panelists the following question because they have observed, as I think Birgitta was mentioning earlier, that women, well, Birgitta, you were saying that women don't often apply for jobs, but also women do not feel comfortable enough taking ownership of all the amazing things that they achieve. So we'd like to ask each of you to share with us an accomplishment, personal or professional, that you're most proud of. And we'll start with you, Birgitta.
Yeah, that's 100% true. That's hard. I think it's also, in my case, compounded by the fact that Danes are literally culturally conditioned to not say nice things about themselves. We're not supposed to stick out from the norm. So, I mean, when I hear the question, I'm like, immediately, I didn't do anything by myself. It's on my team. It's like circumstances. It was luck. It was random. But I am really proud of a few moments where I felt maybe I actually contributed something to the world, maybe just a little bit, but something important. So I'd say that probably the biggest one, at least freshest in mind, is getting regulatory approval for the regulated SARS-CoV-2 sequencing lab at Ginkgo. So that put together a couple pieces from my career. So startup scrappiness and those previous connections we talked about. I could call somebody up and ask for advice, right? And then this experience in the clinical world, but also all the virus sequencing I've done really early on in my career. And really what we did was just tape off some lab benches, literal tape, where we wrote CLIA, which is the regulatory agency that regulates this stuff, and then called up the inspectors, and they came out and inspected us. We did all the documentation in a few weeks. I'm pretty sure we hold the record for the fastest CLIA authorization anywhere. It's got to be really close at least. And it was also, like, in retrospect, kind of visionary, because we didn't think that the virus was going to ever change. And this was a sequencing lab. And I remember having to, like, call the inspector and convince them that it was still a good idea to set up a lab for sequencing the virus. She's like, who needs that? Nobody needs that. Like, and what do we have? Virus variants today are the big thing, right? So we worked with the CDC. We've given early warning on a lot of these variants that have come into the country because of this setup that I feel majorly responsible for.
Yeah, as someone who got to watch from the sidelines on that one, yeah, kudos. That was amazing work by you, Birgitta, by you. So well done with that one. Beatrice.
Yeah, someone who joined the labs immediately after the regulatory approval. I remember those tapes, but yeah, it's really cool to see. I think something that has happened recently is that I started leading projects. So I'm now leading 2 projects. It's something that I didn't foresee to happen as quickly as it did when I first joined Ginkgo. And I left a PhD for this, and being at a PhD level position now, it's really validating. It showed me that the pivot, that making the change in my career was better than anticipated. Plus learning a lot from project management skills and all that. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, very excited to have you leading projects, Beatrice. Ina, how about you?
I'm the oldest member of this panel, so I have an opportunity to look back a little bit more. My proudest achievement is that I have raised and launched 2 amazing young women. So despite the fact that work has been very fulfilling, and I think there's some really cool stuff that I did professionally, I think the fact that I have 2 amazing young women who are constantly teaching me so much about life and different perspectives, and that they are on their own journey to contribute their talents to the world is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And I know I missed out on a lot. I mean, I didn't make every game or every play, missed maybe a couple of birthdays, traveled a ton. So probably, if you add in all the travel, might have only lived in the same house with them for 75% of their lives up until the age of 18. I mean, I feel like despite all that, we have really amazing relationships. I think they are very grounded and are doing amazing things. So I'm most proud of that.
Yeah, thanks, Ina. As I am personally a parent to 8 and 11-year-old children, and I will say that I take a lot of guidance from Ina anytime we get opportunities to discuss personal life. I love hearing her stories and advice and guidance from what an awesome job she did over the years raising her 2 wonderful young women. So thank you, Ina. All right, so we have some great audience questions in the chat over here, and one from a name that I know and love, Sylvia Lustig. So if you're not the Sylvia who works at Ginkgo, I love your name, but I don't know you, but I think it's from our Sylvia. So she said, you often hear the best way to quote unquote move up is to move around, as in change jobs. Has this been your experience? Have you been in a position where you think, I could just stay here for the foreseeable future and be fulfilled, grow within the role? Or have you found that typically results in stagnation? Sylvia, you and I have talked about this a lot. I've been at Ginkgo now for 8 years and have had 3 very different, very interesting roles. So Sylvia knows my thoughts on this, but I will hand it over to the panel for insights from the 3 of you for both Sylvia and others on the call.
Yeah, so the question is moving around the best way to move up? That's an interesting question. So I've felt in every single job I've ever been in, I had expected to stay in that job forever. and circumstances just did not pan out that way, right? And one startup kind of go down, and another one I got laid off from, even though it was a big company, because they closed that business unit. It's just, that doesn't work out necessarily the way you expect. But in terms of, moving around, I've actually taken, the job I took at Ginkgo was actually 2 levels down from what my previous position was, right? I was a VP in that previous position, and I took what was probably a director level job at the time, and then got promoted to senior director and back up to VP. So, I haven't moved up in in that respect, but it's a much bigger company, so it's still a step up. I don't really think about it that way. I've seen people gain better titles when they move laterally, but I haven't personally had that experience, and I don't think I would count on that. I don't think one should just move for the title. Obviously, there's financial considerations there, and you have to do what's right for you. I would never step down it a lot in money unless it was a really exciting job and I was able to do it, and that's not necessarily possible for everybody. So I think it's going to be circumstantial. There's not a hard and fast rule here.
Yeah, I think that prior to Ginkgo, my experience was typically that it wasn't necessarily a higher title or higher salary, but greater growth opportunities in the roles that I was moving to. So I like startups, and I was always going to a startup where I was going from a place where the role that I wanted to go into, the growth opportunity that I wanted to have, was already filled by someone in the previous company. So I did go to new companies to identify those growth opportunities. I think Ginkgo has been a special place, and I imagine there must be other companies out there like this, where as we've grown as an organization, that growth has resulted in consistently expanding opportunities for personal growth and taking on more new and different roles and responsibilities. But I'd love to hear from Ina and Beatrice also, if either of you have thoughts on Sylvia's question.
I completely agree with you, Emily. I think so much of should you move around or should you stay? I think first of all, the question that I actually would ask myself is, do I find a job fulfilling? Am I actually learning more stuff that allows me to continue to develop my skill sets? I kind of think that's more of an internally driven thing that makes sense, instead of, hey, why am I not getting a promotion? I recognize that that's important too. But as long as you feel like you have the opportunity to develop your skill sets so that you can amass more tools in your own toolbox, it will only make you that much more attractive, not only internally within your organization, but externally as well. I think when you feel stagnant, that's when you feel like the job I have now is not giving me an opportunity to learn and develop. That's when I feel like you need to start looking elsewhere. So there's an aspect of, if you feel like you're not moving up the career ladder in a job, in a company where you're still able to develop new skill sets, then yeah, maybe there's something within the company that's creating an artificial glass ceiling for you. But as long as you're developing new skill sets, keep looking elsewhere. You're going to have more opportunities the more skill sets that you accrue. So look at it from that perspective. If a company is willing to promote you, even though you're not developing any skills, then I kind of wonder if that's the right place for you. So make sure it's fulfilling for you too.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree with what Ina said about the job being fulfilling. And if there are growth opportunities within the job, it's been really good to see on my personal experience that that I had opportunities on everything that I was mildly interested in this company, even if it's just talking with people, not necessarily formal training. That was always open doors. So I think if I were seeing closed doors, or if I were seeing that people are not invested in my growth, I would definitely want to leave.
Great, thanks everyone. Okay, so we have another great audience question here from Kristen. Once you started working in your new career after a pivot, how did you address imposter syndrome? Tips for actions you took to get up to speed quickly. Anyone can answer.
I think feedback was really important for me because I felt very insecure in a lot of things that I was doing. Getting feedback, constructive or good feedback, made me feel more that I was on the same page as everybody. So I was trusting my team, and I was trusting that they were being honest with me, that if they say that it looked good, then it looked good. So I was relying a lot on teamwork for that. And then eventually I learned my strengths and I became more confident on them. And I still have imposter syndrome on a bunch of things, but I know what I'm good at, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think owning your strengths and having that great support system of mentors and great manager and great peers to really hold you up also, reinforce that is really helpful. Birgitta?
I actually think that imposter syndrome is almost a normal, right? I always say that everybody worth knowing has it. So it's not an abnormality. There's a female leader here at Ginkgo that I really admire, who has a saying that it goes something like, you should feel exactly qualified for your previous position. So you should always, you know who that is, Emily. You should always be, you should always feel like you're not quite there. You should feel like there's something to learn, and you should be humble about it. You should just tell people, I don't know this. I don't understand this. I feel insecure about this. Tell me more, right? It's okay. It's normal. I don't think I've met anybody even who wouldn't admit to have it if you talk with them enough. At least, again, not people that are worth knowing.
Yeah, I would like to give credit where credit is due. The wonderful senior leader that Birgitta is referring to is our amazing Chief Operating Officer, Reshma Shetty, who's also one of the co-founders. So I think for the four of us, I'll speak for myself, having Reshma in that role and having the opportunity to learn from her and see her serve as a role model for all of the women in the organization has just been a phenomenal experience for me personally. So seeing powerful, amazing, effective senior women leaders is a beautiful thing. Okay, so this question from Celine, I want to, Celine, I'd love for you to send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can email me at egreenhagen@ginkgobioworks.com afterwards, because I want to introduce you to someone, Cynthia Collins. She's asking, I'm looking to leave academia after an 8+ year postdoc, and I feel either overqualified or can't even understand the ads for more advanced positions. Do you have advice to get through and find the right position? So we have a colleague, Cynthia Collins, who is actually a professor at RPI, and then after a pretty extensive career in academia, transitioned to industry and came to Ginkgo. So I'll introduce you to Cynthia after the fact, but Birgitta, Beatrice, Ina, any words of advice for Celine in the moment?
I can't blame you for wanting to go into industry. That was I couldn't get out fast enough. 8 years of postdoc is a long time, but I guarantee you have built up all sorts of amazing skills, and it's going to be a little bit of a culture difference, but people will look at your skills and they will be excited. And I don't think overqualified is a big risk in science. If anything, you might come in at a higher position.
That was what happened to me. I applied for an internship position and I got hired upper. I think in academia, we tend to not see, the aspect that Birgitta mentioned, that we look for a list, and if we don't check all the points, we tend to think that we are not qualified. And another is that I think in academia, for me, I wasn't trained to transferable skills as obviously as other peers. So I would see technical skills only, and I wouldn't feel that I had communication or leadership experience. And then talking with colleagues, also talking with, even during interviews, they would ask me like, how do you train undergrads? And I never saw that as like leadership or training someone else, but it's exactly that. So I would say technical skills, you obviously have more than average. And then just learning how to see those other soft transferable skills that might be different than what you used to valuing.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Beatrice. That's beautiful. All right, we have 3 minutes left. We're going to have a quick lightning round before we close up. So for each of you, what advice would you give your younger self? We'll start with Beatrice.
Trust your gut, I would say. I think I spent a lot of time thinking that I was crazy for being unhappy at a certain position or not. So trust your gut.
Awesome. Ina?
Don't wait to be invited. I think there are lots of opportunities that we can seek out for ourselves and take the bull by the horns. I think this is a trait that a lot of women have. They want to be invited to the party. They want to be invited to the table, but oftentimes you don't have to be invited. Just put yourself out there, be assertive, believe in your own abilities. And I think that'll go far.
It's advice I need to keep reminding myself. Birgitta?
I would say embrace optimism. Don't listen to people who are going to make you second guess yourself. Don't second guess yourself. Once you've made a choice, like you should always like research your choice and decide on your choice. But once you made it, decide that you're going to be happy about it. Like, don't start looking back. Don't think, okay, if I made this other choice, blah, blah, blah. And, just convince yourself it was the right choice and not a bad one. And if you learn something, that's a good thing too.
Yeah, exactly. The what ifs can kill you. So great advice. All right. Well, thank you so much, Birgitta, Beatrice, and Ina for joining us today and for sharing such fantastic advice. Thanks to everyone who tuned in for the discussion and asked such insightful questions. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a recording of today's event along with resources to learn more about opportunities at Ginkgo Bioworks. And in the meantime, be sure to check out Ginkgo Bioworks' profile and jobs on Fairygodboss. We'd also love to hear your feedback to help us improve future events. So please head to the Typeform tab on the right side of your screen to share your thoughts in a 1-minute survey. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.